Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. I'm reminded of something else in this addendum to the follow up to the considerations on the topic of the imperialism, the world imperialism, um, seeing it beyond black and white, and giving an example of what I'm talking about. Um, there are different methodologies, and one of the predominant methodologies at the moment that is waning considerably is the Eurocentric facade of imperialism, and the divide and conquer binaries. There are multiple divide and conquer binaries that are facilitated through that Eurocentric facade of world imperialism. So obviously, one is the whole white-black binary, and a lot of the other binaries find their place within that large global binary. But then it also has religious implications as well, um, north and south, east and west, um, where kinfolk from the Middle East, vie for that identification as being white. When we're looking at literature and additionally from African culture, that being the professed binary, at least allegedly from African perspective, looking at particularly text from translated text of Sunjata and additionally, but obviously that has its own biases in terms of that process of translation. Um, Looking at Latino and Latina, um, again, working to fit it within the white side in that binary. So, anyways, that paradigm is waning, and the Asian facade of imperialism is waxing. It's not a matter of wanting that. It's not a matter of advocating that or otherwise. It's observing. This is what is observed. The momentum, additionally, and one of the reasons why that we observe and contributing a number of the reasons contributing to this phenomena of the waxing and waning respectively, is the difficulty that the Eurocentric facade methodology has in its relationship with Africa and the black side, because it needs the black side. It has difficulty in that very that rote kind of racist methodology of valuing the black side, and in doing that, in the basic methodology is enslavement, torturing the laborer, but not torturing, instilling fear, not the fear of God, but the fear of death and torture, to subdue people into just compliance, to be slave mentality, and that's a weakened being, and so there's only so much that can be gleaned from a weakened being, whether it's a mental labor or a physical labor. The other component of this, and all these techniques are utilized. The other component is identifying the trustee, those who are able to be the bucks, who are the special talents or whatever, but at the same time, they are obedient. But as long as they're obedient, they get all the rewards, all the temptations, all the frills and spills of life for a period. And so that gives people, particularly young talents, something to look forward to, being that superstar. So those are some of the techniques, and all of it is weakening the individual, weakening the spirit, eventually continually weakening the body, the heart, the mind. And so it may be effective, particularly when other groups, collectives around the earth of world civilization abstain from having the same type of abilities of connection and manipulation. But the world is catching up in that respect too. And when people are able to cultivate increasingly genuine and equitable and respectful relationships and cooperation, the black folk involved, the African kinfolk involved, are stronger, and the fruits of that cooperation are stronger. So that's the nature. And that's one of the difficulties that the Eurocentric face of world imperialism seems to have. So, again, it's not white imperialism, it's a facade, because I've said before, continually for years, everything that's being blamed on Europeans and white folk is actually Judeo-Christian, Greco-Roman civilization that enslaves Europeans particularly through the senses of superiority, entrapments, intoxications, and additionally, and then continually leverages European kinfolk, particularly to be mental laborers, mental slaves, and additionally, um, and appeased by the sense of superiority over others. So it's an intricate game. It's a heady game, but it's still enslavement. And you can look at native Europeans and the distinction between the imperialist European kinfolk and native European kinfolk, and looking beyond just the facade of skin color, and additionally, and look, now it's not necessarily the prettiest thing from many of the world, because there's a lot of I hesitate to say hedonism, but there's a lot of just primal being in terms of what's eaten, behavior, and additionally, so it's not necessarily the most it's not necessarily the poster child or whatever for advocacy, but it's still very much the recipient of imperialist oppression. So it's a matter of recognizing that, because in doing that, there's propensity. There's the continuity of mutual support, amongst all those interests, though that thing called solidarity. Um, so here's an example of what I'm talking about in terms of European kinfolk um, being enslaved by Greco-Roman Judeo, and that's not that. Peace and blessings to all Greco-Roman Christian Judeo kinfolk. Peace and blessing across the board. Um, but this is just the nature of it. So here's an example. I see a short clip on Instagram doing that thing. A video about grizzly bears. Oh, they got me. Oh, grizzly bear. Oh, I gotta watch it. So it was talking about the grizzly bears finding that opportune location in the rivers, the streams, where the salmon are jumping, and showing the first few grizzly bears being clumsy and trying to catch the salmon just floating right by the mouth and missing it during the salmon run. But then the clip shows, well, but the knowledgeable grizzly bears know where to sit in the stream. They know where the opportune places are. And then they show one of the grizzly bears catching just a salmon jumping into its mouth. And so a big old fat old salmon. And so that's the grizzly bear. Now then it shows, but the grizzly bears are competing for those opportune places. And so then this is like the brief kind of version of it, but again, so it was like a 30-second clip or whatever. So they show this scenario of Chinook, the smaller grizzly bear, the challenger, going up against Magnus, the prime, the alpha, quote unquote, grizzly bear in the waters. And so right there, who named those bears? Come on. That is very Eurocentric, but it's beyond Eurocentric, because if you think about Chinook, that's native right there. That's native kinfolk. That's a native name, Chinook. So that right there, there's a valuing of ethnicity, of culture, of civilization accordingly. So that's obvious, and it's through the guise of nature. So it seems so innocuous. It seems so benign. But just again, the subconscious, the subliminals is like, oh, Magnus is number one. Chinook is the lower challenger, and so obviously in this scenario, Magnus beats Chinook, and Chinook has to turn away. And so the narrator says, and Magnus shows who is number one. Okay, so that's on the surface level. Magnus sounds like a very Scandinavian name. So there we have that ethnic binary of the Scandinavian Eurocentric, essentially imperialist versus the native kinfolk. It's probably in the land of the Inuit, the Aleut, the northern part of this Western Hemisphere. But grizzly bears, the brown bears at least, are indigenous to Scandinavia as well. So that there's some legitimacy, feigned legitimacy, or whatever, with the appellation of Magnus. But anyway, so on the surface, that looks all white imperialism, defeating native, da 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 da. So then the antagonisms align accordingly. But again, look at the name Magnus. Now, this is my modest knowledge about Scandinavian heritage and language. Magnus does not sound very Scandinavian. It does sound very Scandinavian because many people are named Magnus for hundreds of years. But Magnus, and maybe Magna, is the root element of a term from Elder Foothawk runes, Svensk, or something similarly. magna. But the us is very Latin. It's a Latin word. And even though it might be very Scandinavian for hundreds of years, it may only simply be the fact because um, Christianity invades itself within Scandinavia. And that's a very strong word, but it's applicable. Invades itself within Scandinavia many hundreds of years ago. So even when you showing the epitome of the prime alpha grizzly bear, and showing this pretense of Scandinavia, and additionally, it's actually a Latin name that's being utilized. So that's again going through the layers of what's actually being done, and understanding the nature of the chains in the people's heads, even within Northern Europe, and additionally, and how the ego is manipulated, and again, the binaries, the competition, and fears and insecurities pitting against each other. Um, and even the puppet masters aren't even in control. So ultimately, it's truth and love. Um, it's easier said. It's easier said than seen. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace and Rastafari.